All right, so let's dive into Terraform today.
Okay.
You've probably heard of HashiCorp configuration language,
HCL?
HCL, yeah,
Yeah,
being like the fastest growing language out there.
it is.
It's really taken off. And that kind of speaks volumes about the rise of infrastructure as code, IAC.
For sure.
Now, you're probably already familiar with Terraform
Yeah.
and its power for managing infrastructure.
Right.
But as things scale, you start running into some challenges.
Yeah, that's right. It's like building a house. You start with a simple foundation,
Uh-huh.
but as you add more rooms and complexities, you need more robust structure to support it.
Right.
Open source Terraform is fantastic for getting started, but as your team and infrastructure grow, managing things like state files, permissions, and workflows can get really tricky.
It's like that moment you realize your DIY project needs a professional contractor.
Right.
So where does Terraform Enterprise or TFE fit into all of this?
Think of TFE as that professional contractor. It's a platform specifically designed to address the scaling challenges of Terraform. Okay, provides that robust structure, those advanced tools, and that expert guidance to help you build and manage even the most complex infrastructure.
So TFE is more than just a bigger version of open source Terraform.
Absolutely. It takes the core functionality of Terraform and adds a whole layer of enterprise-grade features. Collaboration tools, fine-grained access control, secure start management, automated workflows, and even policy as code enforcement.
Wow.
It's about bringing order and control to your infrastructure automation.
Okay, I'm intrigued, but let's back up a bit.
Sure.
For those who might not be familiar with the ins and outs of open source Terraform, why does it become a challenge at scale?
Okay.
What are the pain points that TFE is designed to address?
One major challenge is state management.
Okay.
In open source Terraform, you're often left to your own devices to store and manage those state files, which contain crucial information about your infrastructure.
Right.
This can lead to inconsistencies, security risks, and difficulty in collaborating across teams. It's like trying to build a house from blueprints that everyone keeps editing in different ways.
Exactly.
Chaos.
Chaos, yeah. TFE tackles this by providing a centralized and secure location for state file storage and management.
Okay.
Everyone works from the same source of truth, reducing errors and improving collaboration.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So centralized state management, what else does TFE bring to the table?
Collaboration.
Okay.
With TFE, you can create workspaces and projects that allow teams to work together seamlessly. Think of it as creating different departments within your infrastructure organization.
Okay.
Each team can have its own designated workspace with specific permissions and workflows, making it much easier to manage complex projects and ensure that everyone stays on the same page.
So no more stepping on each other's toes in the code base.
Exactly.
That sounds like a huge win for teamwork.
It is, and it goes beyond just teams.
Okay.
TFE provides role-based access control, which allows you to define granular permissions for different individuals or groups.
Yeah. This means you can ensure that only authorized personnel have access to sensitive infrastructure configurations.
Ah, so it's like having security guards for your code.
Right.
No more worrying about someone accidentally deleting that critical server.
Exactly. Security is a paramount concern.
Yeah.
And TFE gives you the tools to control access, enforce policies, and protect your infrastructure from unauthorized changes.
Okay. State management, collaboration, security, anything else that makes TFE stand out.
Automation is another major benefit.
Oh.
TFE integrates seamlessly with version control systems like Git, allowing you to trigger automated workflows every time you push code changes.
Right.
This means you can build, test, and deploy infrastructure changes, automatically reducing manual errors and speeding up your delivery cycles.
So it's like having a robot construction crew that's always on standby,
Right.
ready to build or modify your infrastructure as soon as you hit that commit button.
That's a great way to put it. It's all about streamlining your workflow and making it as efficient and error-free as possible. And it doesn't stop there. TFE also supports policy as code, allowing you to define and enforce infrastructure policies as code.
Policy as code. That sounds a bit like a rule book for your infrastructure.
It is. It allows you to ensure that everyone follows best practices, meets compliance requirements, and avoids costly mistakes.
Okay.
For instance, you can define a policy that prevents anyone from creating a virtual machine without proper cost tags, Or you can restrict the types of cloud resources that can be provisioned.
So it's like having built-in guardrails to keep things in check
Yeah,
and prevent anyone from going off-road with the infrastructure.
exactly.
That's pretty powerful.
It is.
I'm starting to see why TFE is so appealing for organizations looking to scale their infrastructure as code practices.
Exactly. It's all about providing the tools, the structure, and the peace of mind to confidently manage infrastructure at scale.
Right.
And it all starts with understanding the why behind TFE.
Right.
Why is it necessary? What are the benefits?
Right.
And how can it address your specific needs and challenges?
Right, because adopting a platform like TFE is an investment.
It is.
It's not just about the technology itself, but how it fits into your overall infrastructure strategy and organizational goals.
Absolutely.
So let's dig a little deeper into those why questions.
Okay.
For those who are currently working with open source Terraform, what are the key indicators that it's time to consider making the switch to TFE?
Right.
What are those red flags that signal the need for a more robust solution?
Well, there are a few things to look out for. If you're finding it increasingly difficult to manage state files,
Right.
if you're struggling with collaboration and permissions, or if you're encountering security concerns with your open source setup, those are clear signs that it's time to explore TFE.
And what about those who are just starting out with Terraform? Is it worth jumping straight into TFE, or is there a benefit to starting with the open source version?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
There are benefits to both approaches.
Okay.
Starting with open source Terraform allows you to learn the basics, experiment, and get a feel for how it works without the overhead of managing a platform like TFE.
Okay.
However, if you anticipate significant growth in your infrastructure and team, or if you're working with sensitive data or complex compliance requirements,
Right.
starting with TFE from the get-go can save you a lot of headaches down the road.
So it's a bit like choosing between learning to ride a bike with training wheels versus jumping straight onto a motorcycle.
Right.
Both will get you there, but the learning curve and potential risks are different.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
It's all about choosing the right tool for the job and your level of experience.
Exactly. And remember, even if you start with open source Terraform, migrating to TFE later on is a fairly straightforward process.
Okay, that's reassuring to know.
Yeah.
So for those who are ready to make the leap to TFE,
Right.
let's talk about the migration process.
Okay.
What are the key steps involved in moving from an open source setup to a fully managed TFE environment?
Well, the first step is to assess your current infrastructure and Terraform code.
Okay.
You need to understand how your code is structured, how you're managing state files,
Right.
and what your collaboration and security needs are.
Okay.
This will help you determine the best way to map your existing infrastructure onto the TFE platform.
So it's like planning a road trip.
Yeah.
You need to know where you're starting,
Right.
where you want to go, and what route you're going to take to get there.
Exactly. Once you have a clear picture of your current setup, you can start thinking about how to structure your TFE workspaces and projects.
Right.
As we discussed earlier, workspaces allow you to isolate different parts of your infrastructure, and projects help you group related workspaces together. This is a crucial step in ensuring that your TFE environment is organized and manageable.
And what about the actual migration of code and state files? How does that work?
TFE provides tools and documentation to help you seamlessly migrate your existing state files. It's a matter of configuring your Terraform code to point to your TFE workspace, and then using the TFE CLI or API to import your state.
So no need to manually copy and paste everything.
No, thank goodness. TFE makes the migration process as smooth as possible.
Okay.
And once you've migrated your state files, you can start linking your version control system and setting up your automated workflows.
All right, this is all starting to come together.
Right.
But we've covered a lot of ground in this first part of our deep dive.
We have.
I think it's time to take a moment to let everything sink in before we move on.
Sure.
So we'll be back in a moment.
Okay.
Welcome back.
Yeah, so before the break, we were talking about migrating to Terraform Enterprise.
Right.
And the importance of planning out your TFE workspaces and projects.
Absolutely.
Let's look a little closer at how those work and why they're important.
Sure.
When I think of workspaces, I kind of imagine like a developer's desk with all their tools and code.
Yeah.
Is that a fair comparison?
It's a good starting point.
You can think of a workspace in TFE as a dedicated environment for managing a specific piece of your infrastructure.
Okay.
Imagine you have separate teams responsible for your networking, security, and applications.
Right.
Each of these teams could have its own workspace in TFE, giving them a focused area to manage their infrastructure components.
So instead of one giant code base that everyone's
Mhm.
working on, we create these separate workspaces to keep things organized and manageable.
Precisely. It promotes better collaboration and reduces the risk of conflicts or unintended consequences.
Right.
And within these workspaces, you have fine-grained control over permissions.
Okay.
So you can ensure that only authorized team members can access and modify the infrastructure components within their designated workspace.
It sounds like a great way to maintain security and control, especially as teams grow and infrastructure becomes more complex.
It is.
And what about projects? Where do they fit into this picture?
Projects in TFE act as containers for related workspaces.
Okay.
Let's say you're building a new application. You might have a workspace for the networking infrastructure, another for the application code itself,
Right.
and yet another for security policies.
Right.
You can group all of these workspaces under a single project,
Okay.
creating a logical hierarchy for managing your infrastructure.
It's like organizing files into folders on your computer. You create a main folder for a project and then subfolders for different aspects of that project.
That's a perfect analogy.
Okay.
Projects allow you to group related workspaces, providing a clear overview of your infrastructure and simplifying management.
Makes sense.
And remember that integration with version control we talked about earlier.
Yeah. Linking our Git repositories to TFE.
Exactly.
How does that play out in the context of workspaces and projects?
Each workspace can be linked to a specific branch in your Git repository.
Okay.
So when your team pushes code changes to that branch, it automatically triggers a run in the corresponding TFE workspace.
Nice.
This automated workflow ensures that your infrastructure is always in sync with your latest code.
So we're not just managing code in TFE, we're automating the entire infrastructure deployment process.
That's right. It's about bringing automation and consistency to your infrastructure workflows,
Right.
reducing manual errors, and freeing up your team to focus on more strategic tasks.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about another key feature of TFE policy as code.
Okay.
We touched on this earlier, but I'd love to hear more about how it works and why it's so valuable.
Policy as code is a powerful way to ensure that your infrastructure adheres to your organization's standards and best practices.
Okay.
Instead of relying on manual checks or hoping that everyone follows the rules, you can define those rules as code and enforce them automatically within TFE.
So it's like having a built-in compliance officer for your infrastructure,
I like that.
making sure that everything's up to code, so to speak.
TFE uses a policy as code engine called Sentinel.
Okay.
Sentinel allows you to write policies that check various aspects of your infrastructure code, such as resource configurations, naming conventions, or even cost constraints.
Could you give us a concrete example of what a policy might look like in Sentinel?
Certainly. Let's say you have a policy that requires all virtual machines to be tagged with a specific cost center.
Okay.
In Sentinel, you could write a policy that checks for the presence of this tag on any virtual machine resource being provisioned.
Huh.
If the tag is missing, the policy would trigger an error and prevent the resource from being created.
So no more rogue virtual machines spinning up without proper accounting.
Right.
That's a great example of how policy as code can help organizations maintain control and compliance.
Absolutely.
What are some other benefits of using policy as code?
Well, it promotes consistency and reduces the risk of human error.
Okay.
Policy as code also improves security by enforcing security best practices from the start.
Right.
It can even streamline audits by providing a clear and auditable record of your infrastructure policies.
It sounds like policy as code is a game changer for organizations looking to implement a robust and secure infrastructure automation strategy.
It is, and TFE makes it easy to integrate policy as code into your workflows.
Fine.
You can define policies at various levels, such as the organization, workspace, or even individual runs.
Right.
This gives you a lot of flexibility in how you implement and enforce your policies.
This all sounds incredibly powerful, but I imagine there's a learning curve involved in mastering these features.
Absolutely. But HashiCorp provides extensive documentation, tutorials, and training resources to help you get up to speed with TFE and its advanced capabilities.
That's good to hear. What about the actual migration process? We talked about some of the technical steps involved.
Yeah.
But are there any organizational or strategic considerations that organizations should keep in mind when making the move to TFE?
One crucial aspect is getting buy-in from your team.
Okay.
It's important to involve your team early on and clearly communicate the benefits of moving to TFE.
Right.
Provide training and support to help your team embrace the new platform and its capabilities.
It's a bit like moving to a new city. It's not just about packing your bags and finding a new apartment.
Right.
It's about understanding the culture, learning your way around,
Yeah.
and making connections in your new environment.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
Migration to TFE is a journey,
Right.
and it's important to have a plan, communicate clearly, and support your team along the way. And it doesn't have to be an all-or-nothing approach.
Okay.
You can start with a pilot project, migrate a small part of your infrastructure to TFE,
Right.
and gradually expand your adoption as you gain confidence and experience.
So dip your toes in the water before diving in head first.
Exactly.
That's a great approach to minimize risk and ensure a smooth transition.
And remember, the goal is to empower your team to manage infrastructure confidently and efficiently.
All this talk of TFE's amazing features makes me want to learn more about how it actually works behind the scenes.
Sure.
Can you give us a peek under the hood and explain the core components that make TFE tick?
Certainly, let's start with a fundamental concept in TFE.
Oh,
The concept of a run.
a run, like going for a jog?
Not quite, although it does involve movement.
Okay.
A run in TFE is essentially a single execution of your Terraform code.
Right.
When you make changes to your infrastructure code and commit those changes to your version control system, TFE triggers a run to apply those changes to your infrastructure.
Okay, so it's like hitting the go button on your infrastructure updates.
Exactly.
What happens during a run?
Well, during a run,
Yeah.
TFE performs a series of steps.
Okay.
It starts by retrieving your Terraform code from your linked version control repository.
Mhm.
Then it analyzes your code to determine what changes need to be made to your infrastructure.
So it figures out what needs to be built, modified, or torn down based on the changes you've made to your code.
Yeah.
That sounds a bit like magic.
It is quite impressive,
Yeah.
but it's all based on the logic you define in your Terraform code.
Right.
Once TFE has a clear picture of the desired state of your infrastructure, it creates a plan.
A plan. Is this like a blueprint of the changes that will be made?
Exactly. The plan outlines in detail all the actions that TFE will take to bring your infrastructure into alignment with your code.
Okay.
It shows you what resources will be created, modified, or destroyed,
Yeah.
and it gives you a chance to review and approve those changes before they're applied.
So it's like having a preview of the construction project before any hammers swing.
It is.
That sounds like a valuable safety net.
The plan allows you to catch any potential errors or unintended consequences before they impact your infrastructure.
Right.
Once you've reviewed and approved the plan, TFE executes it, applying the changes to your infrastructure.
So the plan is the blueprint,
Right.
and the run is the actual construction phase where all the changes are put into place.
Yes.
What happens after a run completes?
Well, TFE stores the updated state of your infrastructure in its secure state file storage,
Okay.
ensuring that you always have an accurate and up-to-date representation of your infrastructure.
Right.
And it keeps a detailed log of the entire run process, including the plan, the applied changes, and any output or errors that occurred.
Right.
This provides valuable insights into your infrastructure deployments and makes troubleshooting much easier.
So TFE not only automates the deployment process, but it also provides a comprehensive audit trail and a single source of truth for your infrastructure state. Impressive.
Yes, and all of this is managed within TFE's backend infrastructure, which is where the real magic happens.
The back-end infrastructure. What's that all about?
TFE's backend infrastructure consists of several components that work together to provide all the features and functionality we've been discussing.
Okay, spill the beans. What are these components?
Well, there's a core application server that handles things like user authentication, API requests, and workflow orchestration.
Okay.
Then there's a database for storing configuration data, state files, and run logs.
Right.
And there are worker nodes that execute the actual Terraform runs, applying the changes to your infrastructure.
So it's a distributed system with different parts working together in harmony.
Exactly, and all of these components can be scaled horizontally to accommodate the needs of your organization.
Okay.
As your infrastructure and team grow, you can add more worker nodes or database servers to handle the increased load.
That's the beauty of a well-designed distributed system.
It is.
You can scale it up or down as needed,
Right.
ensuring that TFE can keep pace with your organization's growth.
Absolutely. And TFE provides tools for monitoring and managing this back-end infrastructure.
Okay.
You can get insights into resource utilization, track run times, and identify potential bottlenecks.
Right.
It's all about giving you the visibility and control you need to run TFE smoothly and efficiently.
Okay, I think I'm starting to get a grasp on the inner workings of TFE.
Good.
It's like a well-oiled machine with all these different parts working together to orchestrate your infrastructure automation.
That's a great way to visualize it. And remember, all of this complexity is abstracted away from the user.
Okay.
Your team interacts with TFE through a simple and intuitive web interface or via the command line interface if they prefer. Right.
The goal is to make it easy for your team to focus on building and managing infrastructure without having to worry about the underlying technical details.
Well, I must say, this deep dive into TFE has been an eye-opener.
Yeah.
We've covered a lot of ground from the basic concepts of workspaces and runs to the intricacies of the back-end infrastructure.
We have.
But there's one crucial aspect we haven't explored yet.
Okay.
The migration strategies for moving from open source Terraform to TFE.
Right.
I think we need to devote some time to unpacking that in detail.
Yeah, absolutely.
What do you say we dive into that after a quick break?
Sounds good.
Welcome back. We've been on quite a journey, exploring the power and benefits of Terraform Enterprise.
It is.
We've talked about workspaces, runs, policy as code, even peeked behind the scenes at TFE's back-end infrastructure.
We did.
Now let's tackle the big question.
Yeah.
How do you actually make the move from open source Terraform to TFE?
That's where migration strategies come in.
Okay.
It's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
The right strategy for you depends on your organization's size, complexity, and risk tolerance.
So it's like choosing a hiking trail.
Yeah,
Some folks prefer a leisurely stroll,
right.
while others are all about that challenging climb.
Exactly. Let's start with a common approach, the lift and shift strategy.
Okay.
This is best for smaller, less complex setups.
Right.
It's essentially taking your existing Terraform code and state files and moving them directly into a TFE workspace.
Sounds pretty straightforward.
It is.
Just pick everything up and plop it into TFE.
In essence, yes. But even with lift and shift, there are some best practices.
Okay.
It's a good opportunity to review your code structure,
Yeah.
clean up any inconsistencies, and ensure everything is well organized before moving it into TFE.
So it's like moving to a new apartment.
Right.
You don't just pack up every box without sorting through things first.
Exactly.
A little decluttering goes a long way.
Now, for larger organizations with more complex infrastructure, a phased approach is often preferred.
Phased approach. That sounds a bit more strategic.
It is.
Yeah.
This involves breaking down your infrastructure into smaller, manageable chunks
Okay.
and migrating them to TFE incrementally.
Right.
You might start with a non-critical application or a specific environment, get it working smoothly in TFE, and then move on to the next piece.
So it's like renovating a house room by room instead of tackling the whole thing at once.
Right.
Less disruption, easier to manage.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
A phased approach allows you to minimize risk, gain experience with TFE,
Right.
and fine-tune your processes along the way.
Okay. Lift and shift for smaller setups. Phased approach for larger ones. Are there any other migration strategies we should know about?
There's also the hybrid approach, which combines elements of both.
Correct.
You might lift and shift some parts of your infrastructure while taking a phased approach for others.
Right.
It really depends on your specific needs and priorities.
So it's about having a toolbox of strategies and choosing the right tool for each part of the job.
Exactly. And regardless of which strategy you choose,
Okay.
there are some common threads that run through successful TFE migrations.
Okay, let's hear those golden nuggets of wisdom.
First and foremost, planning is paramount.
Okay.
Don't just jump into a migration without a clear understanding of your current infrastructure,
Mm-hmm.
your goals for TFE,
Right.
and a well-defined plan for how you'll get there.
So back to that hiking analogy.
Yes.
We need a map and a compass before we set off into the TFE wilderness.
Absolutely. And just like any journey, communication is key.
Right.
Keep your team informed every step of the way.
Yeah.
Explain why you're migrating to TFE,
Mm-hmm.
what the benefits are, and how it will impact their workflows.
A little transparency goes a long way in smoothing out any bumps in the road.
Indeed, and don't underestimate the importance of training.
Okay.
TFE is a powerful platform,
Right.
but it does have a learning curve.
Yeah.
Provide your team with the resources and support they need to become proficient in using TFE.
So invest in some TFE driving lessons to make sure everyone feels comfortable behind the wheel.
Exactly. And finally, don't be afraid to iterate.
Okay.
The beauty of TFE is its flexibility.
Uh-huh.
You can adjust your processes, refine your policies, and optimize your workflows as you gain experience with the platform.
It's about continuous improvement.
Right.
Always learning, always tweaking, always striving for that perfectly automated infrastructure.
That's the spirit. And remember, the goal of migrating to TFE is to empower your team to build and manage infrastructure with confidence, speed, and security.
Well said. This deep dive into Terraform Enterprise has been an incredible journey.
It has.
We've explored the why, the what, and the how of this powerful platform,
We did.
and I'm sure our listeners are brimming with insights and ideas.
I hope so.
And to our listeners, remember, whether you're just starting your IAC journey or you're a seasoned Terraform pro, TFE offers a path to a more efficient, collaborative, and secure way to manage your infrastructure. So go forth, automate with confidence, and never stop exploring the ever-evolving world of infrastructure as code.